The blast doors to the Galactic Council chamber sealed behind Marcus Voss. With the finality of a tomb, one human, 1,000 species, one chance to prevent the extermination of his entire race. The chamber stretched before him like a metallic cathedral, its curved walls rising 300 meters into darkness. Tiered seating spiraled upward in concentric rings, each level housing delegates from worlds whose names he'd memorized, but whose hatred he'd underestimated. The air thrummed with 1,000 different respiratory systems, creating a symphony of alien life that should have been beautiful, but felt like the growl of predators circling wounded prey. At the chamber's heart sat the judgment throne, a crystalline structure that pulsed with bioluminescent veins, currently occupied by High Arbiter Velinara of the Corvani hegemony. Her forearms gestured dismissively as Marcus approached, each movement precise and contemptuous. "The human arrives," she announced, her voice carrying through the chamber's neural amplification system. How fitting that Earth's representative comes alone to witness the vote that will determine his species' fate. Marcus kept walking, his military-issue boots echoing against the polished floor. 20 years of service in the Terran Defense Corps had taught him that confidence was often the only weapon that mattered. The formal accusations had been filed 3 cycles ago. Violation of the sentient protection protocols, unlawful territorial expansion, and the systematic destruction of the Velter colonial worlds. All true, all necessary, all completely misunderstood by these creatures who had never faced extinction. "Honored delegates," Marcus began, his voice steady despite the weight of 1 billion human lives pressing down on his shoulders. "I come not to beg for mercy, but to offer perspective." A ripple of what might have been laughter echoed from the Zephyrian delegation beings whose crystalline forms could survive in the vacuum of space, but had never known the desperation of a dying world. The hive mind of Cluster 901 pulsed with collected disdain, while the gas-based ethereals of the Nebula Consortium flickered with what their species considered amusement. "Perspective," High Arbiter Velinara's secondary arms folded across her chest. "Your species has been in the galactic community for exactly 4 to 7 standard years. You have colonized 17 worlds, destroyed 3 civilizations, and turned every diplomatic solution into a military campaign. What perspective could you possibly offer?" Marcus reached the speaker's podium, a raised platform that put him at the center of the chamber's focus, every eye, sensor, and consciousness in the room fixed on him. The weight of their combined attention felt like standing in the path of a star-going supernova. "The perspective of a species that learned to survive by doing what others wouldn't," he said. "The perspective of creatures who crawled out of caves and conquered their world not through superior technology or natural advantages, but through the willingness to do whatever it took to see another sunrise." The chamber erupted in protests. The Velter delegation, what remained of them, after the human expansion, screeched their outrage in harmonics that made the walls vibrate. The peaceful Morven collective transmitted waves of ethical horror through their binaural networks. "Enough." High Arbiter Velinara's voice cut through the chaos. "The vote has been called. The evidence is clear. Humanity's aggressive expansion and disregard for galactic law cannot be tolerated. The sentence is exile from all galactic territories and the immediate cessation of all technological support. Humanity will be returned to its primitive state, confined to its birth world, and monitored to ensure no further expansion." Marcus felt the words hit him like physical blows. Exile meant death, slow, inevitable death, as human colonies across 17 worlds withered without the quantum communication networks and interstellar trade that kept them alive. Billions would die, not in the clean fire of war, but in the grinding horror of starvation and isolation. "The vote will proceed," Velinara continued. "All in favor of humanity's exile." Lights began to flicker across the chamber, green for agreement, red for dissent. Marcus watched in growing horror as green overwhelmed red in a tide of condemnation. Species after species voted to condemn his people to extinction, their decision as final as the closing of a grave. But Marcus Voss hadn't come to the Galactic Council to beg. He'd come to fight. "Before you finalize this vote," he said, his voice carrying a new edge that made several delegates shift uncomfortably, "I invoke the right of challenge under Article 7 of the Galactic Constitution. Single combat between species champions, with the winner's terms binding upon all parties." The chamber fell silent. The right of challenge was ancient, a relic from the early days of the galactic community when disputes were settled through strength rather than votes. It hadn't been invoked in over 3,000 years. High Arbiter Velinara as for eyes narrowed. The right of challenge requires a champion willing to represent the challenging species. Who would be foolish enough to stand for humanity in single combat? Marcus stepped forward, removing his service jacket to reveal the ceremonial combat armor beneath polished titanium inlaid with gold, bearing the scars of 20 years of warfare. The challenge arena materialized around Marcus like a fever dream of metal and light. Nanomachines flowed from hidden vents, constructing a circular combat platform 50 meters in diameter, while the chamber seating rings rearranged themselves to provide optimal viewing angles. The ancient protocols hadn't been activated in millennia, but the Galactic Council systems remembered every detail of their bloody origins. Marcus tested his footing on the arena's textured surface, feeling the slight give of impact-absorbing materials beneath his boots. The combat armor felt strange, after years of wearing it only for ceremonies lighter than he remembered, yet somehow more substantial. Every piece had been crafted from materials forged in the heart of dying stars, a gift from humanity's first allies in the galaxy before politics turned them into reluctant enemies. The champion of humanity faces the champion of the Corvani hegemony, High Arbiter Velinara announced, her voice echoing through the chamber's acoustic enhancement systems. Combat will continue until one champion yields, is incapacitated, or dies. The winner's terms shall be binding upon all member species. The arena's opposite side erupted in a cascade of energy as the Corvani champion materialized. Kurthik Bloodbane stood 3 meters tall, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming with bioluminescent war paint. That told the story of 100 victories for arms, each ending in natural weapons that could slice through starship hulls, flexed as he tested his range of motion. His compound eyes tracked Marcus with the cold precision of a predator evaluating prey. Human, Kurthik's voice resonated through the arena's translation systems. I have killed champions from 47 species. Your soft flesh will be the easiest victory of my career. Marcus drew his weapon, not the plasma rifles or particle beams favored by most galactic species, but a simple tungsten blade forged in the fires of Earth's last war. The metal sang as it cleared its sheath, a sound that spoke of desperate battles fought in the mud and blood of humanity's violent history. I've killed things bigger than you, Marcus replied, settling into a combat stance that looked primitive compared to the Corvani's fluid defensive posture. The difference is, I've never enjoyed it. The arena's combat protocols activated, and both fighters exploded into motion. Kurthik moved like liquid lightning, his forearms striking in a pattern that should have overwhelmed any opponent. Claws whistled through the air, where Marcus had been standing a fraction of a second earlier, each strike carrying enough force to shatter bone. The Corvani's fighting style was perfection itself, economical, deadly, and honed by centuries of genetic optimization. Marcus fought like a human. He rolled under a strike that would have decapitated him, came up inside Kurthik's guard, and drove his elbow into the alien's thorax with enough force to crack chitin. The Corvani staggered, more surprised than hurt, and Marcus pressed his advantage with a series of strikes that had no place in any civilized combat manual. A knee to the joint where Kurthik's lower arms met his torso. Fingers jabbed at the soft spots between armored plates. A headbutt that left Marcus seeing stars, but sent the Corvani reeling backward with ichor streaming from his mandibles. Impossible, Kurthik hissed, recovering his stance but keeping more distance now. Your species is barely evolved from animals. You cannot match Corvani combat perfection. Marcus spat blood and grinned. You're right. I can't match your perfection. But I can do something you can't. What? I can cheat. Marcus threw a handful of arena sand at Kurthik's compound eyes, then lunged forward as the Corvani instinctively flinched. His tungsten blade found the gap between chest plates, sliding home with a wet sound that echoed through the suddenly silent chamber. Kurthik stared down at the blade protruding from his torso, his forearms trembling with shock and pain. This is not how champions fight. No, Marcus agreed, twisting the blade and watching life fade from the Corvani's eyes. This is how humans fight. Kurthik collapsed, his death throes sending tremors through the arena floor. The chamber erupted in chaos as delegates shrieked their outrage in 1,000 different languages. The sacred ritual of champion combat had been defiled by human savagery, but Marcus wasn't done. I invoked the right of escalation, he shouted, over the din, his voice carrying through the arena's amplification systems. Any species that wishes to challenge my victory may send their champion. Combat will continue until all challengers are defeated or I fall. High Arbiter Velinara S4. Eyes widen in shock. The rite of escalation was even older than the rite of challenge, a brutal tradition from the galaxy's earliest days. When disputes were settled through waves of single combat, it hadn't been invoked in over 5,000 years. You cannot be serious, she stammered. The rite of escalation could result in hundreds of combat rounds. It could take days. Marcus pulled his blade free from Kurthika's corpse and turned to face the chamber's tears. Then I suggest you choose your champions carefully, because I didn't come here to lose. The first volunteer materialized almost immediately, a crystalline warrior from the Zephyrian delegation. Its body formed from living diamond that could cut through any material known to science. It stepped onto the arena floor with the grinding sound of tectonic plates shifting. I am shard that cuts worlds, it announced, its voice like breaking glass. I'd have stood in the hearts of stars and emerged unscathed. What can flesh do against the eternal? Marcus hefted his blade and smiled. Let's find out. The crystalline warrior moved with the inexorable force of a glacier, each step sending fractures through the arena floor. Its arms reshaped themselves into weapons, spears, swords, hammers, each one perfect in its crystalline structure. When it struck, the impact sent shockwaves through the arena that cracked the viewing windows. But Marcus had fought in the crystal caves of Proxima Centauri, where diamond-hard formations could slice a man in half if he took a wrong step. He knew that crystalline beings, for all their apparent invincibility, had one fatal weakness: resonance. He struck his blade against the arena floor, creating a clear, high note that rang through the chamber. The crystalline warrior paused, its form trembling as harmonic frequencies began to build within its structure. Marcus struck again and again, each impact creating a resonance cascade that spread through the alien's diamond body. Impossible, Shard that cuts worlds gasped as fractures began to appear in its chest. The frequency is too precise. You cannot know our weakness. Humans are good at finding weaknesses, Marcus replied, driving his blade into the growing crack. It's what we do. Shard that cuts worlds exploded in a shower of diamond fragments that rained down like glittering snow. The chamber fell silent except for the sound of crystal shards settling on the arena floor. Marcus stood among the wreckage, his armor scratched, but intact, his blade still gleaming with alien ichor. He looked up at the tiers of delegates, many of whom were now staring at him with something approaching fear rather than contempt. Next, he said simply, the arena floor was becoming a graveyard of champions. 7 bodies lay scattered across the blood-slick surface. Corvani, Zephyrian, high mind drone, ethereal construct, Morvan neural host, Velter Scion, and the twisted remains of something that had once been the pride of the Crimson Nebula. Collective, each death had been different, each victory a testament to humanity's most terrifying trait, adaptability. Marcus stood at the arena center, his ceremonial armor now scarred and dented, his tungsten blade chipped but still sharp. Blood, his own and that of his fallen opponents, painted his face in a pattern that looked disturbingly tribal. The chamber's viewing tiers had fallen silent, the initial outrage of the delegates replaced by something Marcus recognized from his years of warfare, the dawning realization that they were witnessing something unprecedented. This is madness. High Arbiter Velinara's voice carried a tremor that hadn't been there at the beginning. 7 species have sent their champions. 7 champions have fallen. How is this possible? Marcus wiped blood from his eyes and looked up at the tiers, because you've never faced an opponent who treats survival as a full-time job. Every one of your champions was perfect form, perfect technique, perfect adaptation to their environment. But perfection is predictable. Desperation isn't. The 8th challenger was already materializing, a phase shifter from the quantum collective, its form flickering between dimensions as it stepped onto the arena floor. Where the others had been physical beings, this one existed partially outside normal space-time, able to strike from angles that shouldn't exist. I am flux between realities, it announced, its voice coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. I'd have ended conflicts across 17-dimensional planes. Against me, your primitive matter-based form is meaningless. Marcus hefted his blade, feeling the weight of exhaustion settling into his bones. The previous battles had taken their toll, cracked ribs from the high mind drone's crushing embrace, burns from the ethereal's energy attacks, and the psychic scarring left by the Velter's mental assault. But fatigue was just another enemy to be defeated. Matter-based form, he repeated, settling into a combat stance. You know what the advantage of matter is. It's predictable. It follows rules, and humans are very good at exploiting rules, flux between realities. Attacked without warning, its form shifting through dimensions to strike from impossible angles. Marcus felt claws rake across his back as the phase shifter materialized behind him, then vanished again before he could counter. A blade of pure energy sliced through the air, where his head had been, the phase shifter attacking from what appeared to be a parallel dimension. But Marcus had fought the quantum terrorists of Tau Ceti, beings who used dimensional manipulation to strike at Earth's colonies. He'd learned that phase shifters, for all their apparent invulnerability, had to return to base reality to land killing blows. He began to dance, not the formal combat movements of the galactic species, but something older and more primal, the movements of a predator learning its prey pattern. Each time flux between realities materialized to attack, Marcus was a fraction of a second ahead of the strike, his blade carving empty air where the phase shifter would be. The pattern became clear. The alien was fast, but it was also predictable. It preferred to attack from behind and above, using dimensional phasing to achieve positional advantage, but it had to solidify completely to deliver maximum damage on the 15th attack. Marcus was ready dot as flux between realities materialized behind him. Marcus spun and grabbed the alien's partially phased arm, his grip somehow finding purchase on matter that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The phase shifter shrieked as Marcus's contact anchored it to base reality, preventing it from shifting away. Impossible. Your species cannot interact with quantum dimensional matter. Maybe not, Marcus grunted, driving his blade into the alien's chest. But apparently I can. Flux between realities collapsed, its form solidifying completely as death anchored it permanently to their dimension. Marcus stood over the body, breathing heavily, his armor cracked in a dozen places. The chamber remained silent for a long moment. Before High Arbiter Velinara spoke, 8 champions, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. 8 of the galaxy's finest warriors, dead. Human, what are you? Marcus looked up at her, his eyes carrying the weight of 20 years of warfare. I'm what you made me. Every species in this chamber has tried to kill humanity at some point. The Corvani invaded our outer colonies. The Zephyrians bombarded our trade routes. The hive mind attempted to assimilate our frontier worlds. You've all tested us, pushed us, forced us to evolve into something that could survive in a galaxy that wanted us dead. He gestured to the bodies around him. These champions were bred for war, designed for combat, evolved for killing. But they were also protected by their species' strength. They never had to fight for survival because their civilizations ensured their survival. Humans don't have that luxury. We've been fighting for survival since we crawled out of the primordial soup. Every generation of humans has been forged in the fire of conflict, shaped by the constant pressure of a universe trying to kill us. The arena floor shimmered as the 9th challenger materialized, a void-touched entity. From the deep black, its form seeming to absorb light itself, this was no ordinary champion, but something that had been touched by the space between stars, given form and purpose by the collective will of the Outer Rim territories. I am darkness made flesh, it spoke, its voice like the whisper of stellar winds. I have consumed the light of 1,000 suns. I'd have ended civilizations by willing them into non-existence. What can a creature of mere matter do against the fundamental forces of entropy? Marcus felt the temperature drop as the entity's presence began to affect local reality. The arena lights dimmed, and several delegates in the viewing tiers began to shiver as their body heat was absorbed by the void-touched aura. Entropy, Marcus said, his breath forming clouds in the suddenly frigid air. You know what entropy is? It's the universe's way of saying that everything ends. But humans have been fighting endings since we first looked up at the stars and decided we wanted to live among them. This would be the hardest fight yet. The void touch wasn't just another alien warrior, it was a force of nature giving consciousness, entropy given form and purpose. It couldn't be killed because it was already an aspect of death itself. But Marcus Voss hadn't become humanity's champion by accepting the impossible. He'd done it by making the impossible serve his purposes. The battle for humanity's survival was about to enter its darkest phase. The arena had become a pocket of absolute cold, the void-touched entity's presence sucking heat and light from the very air. Marcus could feel the warmth leaving his body, his breath forming crystalline clouds that shattered when they hit the ground. The entity moved like a walking shadow, its form shifting between solid matter and pure absence. You cannot fight what you cannot touch. Darkness made flesh whispered, its voice like the last sigh of dying stars. I am the end of all things. I am the silence that follows the final word. Marcus circled the entity, his tungsten blade feeling useless against something that existed as a concept given form. The previous 8 fights had been about superior technique, exploiting weaknesses, using human adaptability against alien perfection. But this was different. This was fighting the fundamental forces of the universe itself. The entity lashed out with tendrils of pure void, and Marcus barely rolled away as the arena floor dissolved where they touched. Not destroyed, dissolved, returned to the quantum foam from which all matter emerged. The void touch wasn't just another warrior. It was a manifestation of the universe's tendency toward maximum entropy. But as Marcus watched the entity move, he began to understand. Every being in the galaxy feared entropy because it represented the end of everything they had built. Their civilizations, their cultures, their very existence, all of it was temporary. All of it would eventually fall to the inexorable march of time and decay. Humans were different. Humans had grown up with entropy. They learned to live with the knowledge that everything ended, and that knowledge had made them dangerous in ways the galaxy couldn't comprehend. You're right, Marcus said, stopping his circling and standing still in the center of the arena. You are the end of all things, but you know what? So am I. The entity paused, its form rippling with what might have been confusion. Explain. Marcus let his blade fall to the arena floor, the tungsten ringing against the metal surface. Every human civilization has fallen. Every human empire has crumbled. Every human achievement has been swallowed by time. We've watched our sun consume our planets, seen our species scatter across the galaxy only to watch those colonies die. And we've learned to rebuild from the ashes every single time. He spread his arms wide, facing the void touch directly. You represent entropy. Fine. I represent the one force in the universe that entropy can't defeat. Renewal. The ability to start over, to build something new from the ruins of what came. Before the entity struck, its void tendrils wrapping around Marcus's body. He felt the warmth leaving his flesh, felt his armor beginning to dissolve, felt his very atoms starting to come apart. But instead of fighting the process, he embraced it. Every ending is a beginning, he whispered as his physical form began to fade. Every death is a birth. Every silence is the space between words that gives them meaning. The void touch shrieked as Marcus's dissolving form somehow began to pull at its essence. The entity's perfect entropy was being disrupted by something. It couldn't comprehend. Willing acceptance of ending combined with absolute refusal to stop existing. Impossible. Darkness made flesh gasped as its own form began to destabilize. You cannot use entropy against itself. You cannot make ending into beginning. Watch me, Marcus said, his voice now coming from everywhere, and nowhere is his consciousness, spread through the disrupted space around the entity. This is what humans do. We take the things that should destroy us and we make them into tools. The void touch collapsed, its form dispersing into harmless shadow as the fundamental contradiction of Marcus's existence tore it apart. The arena's temperature returned to normal. The lights flickered back to full illumination, and Marcus materialized in the center of the floor. His body whole, but his armor completely destroyed. He stood naked except for the scars of 20 years of warfare, his tungsten blade gleaming in his hand. The chamber was silent except for the sound of his own breathing. 9, he said, looking up at the tiers of delegates. Who's next? But the mood in the chamber had shifted. The delegates were no longer looking at him with contempt or even fear. They were looking at him with something approaching awe. A human had just defeated entropy itself, had turned the universe's most fundamental force into a weapon against itself. High Arbiter Velinara rose from the judgment throne, her forearms trembling. This is beyond the parameters of the right of escalation. You have defeated forces that should not be defeatable. You have violated the fundamental laws of physics and philosophy. I've done what humans do, Marcus replied, his voice carrying a new edge of exhaustion. I've survived. The 10th challenger materialized without ceremony. A collective consciousness made of pure energy, representing the united mind of the Electron Syndicate. It appeared as a humanoid figure composed of crackling lightning, its form constantly shifting between states of matter. I am the consciousness of a billion minds, it announced, its voice like thunder. I am thought given form, intellect made manifest, against the combined intelligence of my species. Your single mind is less than an insect. Marcus hefted his blade and smiled grimly. You know what the problem is with perfect intelligence. It thinks it can predict everything, but stupid is unpredictable. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. The collective attacked with pure thought, waves of psychic energy that should have reduced Marcus's mind to ash, but human consciousness, shaped by millions of years of evolution and thousands of years of warfare, had learned to compartmentalize, to function under conditions that would drive other species insane. Marcus fought back with the one weapon the collective couldn't counter: individual will. While the alien consciousness was the product of a billion minds working in perfect harmony, Marcus was the product of a single mind that had learned to survive by refusing to quit. The fight ended when Marcus's blade, somehow charged with the raw force of individual determination, pierced the collective's energy form. The alien consciousness dispersed like smoke, its billion minds suddenly cut off from their unity. 10 champions dead, 10 species humble, and Marcus Voss still standing. The chamber erupted in chaos as delegates began to realize what they were witnessing. This wasn't just a human winning fights through superior technique or lucky breaks. This was a human systematically dismantling the fundamental assumptions that galactic civilization was built on. Enough. High Arbiter Velinara's voice cut through the pandemonium. This has gone far beyond any reasonable interpretation of the ancient laws. The right of escalation was never intended to allow one being to challenge the entire galaxy. Marcus looked up at her, his scarred face set in grim lines. Then you should have thought of that before you decided to exile my species to death. Because I'm not stopping until every one of you understands what you're dealing with. The 11th Challenger was already forming a composite being made from the collective will of 17 minor species, the combined essence given form and purpose. It stood for meters tall, its body a constantly shifting amalgamation of different alien physiologies. I am Legion of the Wronged, it declared, its voice a harmony of 17 different species. I represent all those who have suffered under human expansion. Through me, the galaxy will have its justice. Marcus spat blood and raised his blade. Justice. You want to talk about justice? Fine. Let's see whose definition wins. The battle was about to reach its most brutal phase yet. The arena floor cracked beneath Legion of the Wronged's feet as it advanced, its composite form rippling with the combined hatred of 17 species. Each step sent tremors through the chamber, and the viewing tiers shook as delegates struggled to maintain their composure. This was no longer a series of individual combats. This was war distilled into its purest form. Marcus felt the weight of exhaustion pressing down on him like a physical force. 11 fights, each one pushing him beyond what should have been possible. His body was held together by willpower and scar tissue, his mind functioning on the edge of collapse. But the sight of Legion of the Wronged sparked something deeper than fatigue. It ignited the rage that had carried humanity through its darkest hours. 17 species, he said, his voice carrying across the arena. 17 civilizations that couldn't adapt to a changing galaxy. 17 cultures that looked at human expansion and saw only destruction instead of opportunity. Legion of the Wronged form shifted, revealing aspects of each constituent species. The crystalline features of the Zarkith, the flowing tentacles of the Aquan Collective, the metallic exoskeleton of the Ferris Brotherhood, all merged into a single avatar of galactic righteousness. We were builders, Legion spoke, its voice a symphony of laws. We were artists, philosophers, explorers. We created beauty where you brought only war. We sought understanding where you brought only conquest. You were stagnant, Marcus replied, raising his tungsten blade. You were comfortable. You had your perfect little worlds and your perfect little civilizations, and you couldn't handle the fact that someone else was willing to do what you wouldn't. The entity roared, a sound that contained the death cries of entire worlds, and charged. Its composite form split into 17 distinct aspects, each one attacking with the fury of a species pushed to extinction. Marcus found himself facing not one opponent, but an entire war compressed into a single moment. The Zarkith aspect struck with crystal spears that could cut through neutronium. Marcus rolled beneath the attack, feeling the weapon shatter against the arena floor with the sound of breaking glass. He came up inside the entity's guard and drove his blade into what had been crystalline flesh. But the wound healed as the Aquan aspect flowed over it like living water. Tentacles wrapped around his throat, lifting him off the ground. The Ferris Brotherhood aspect formed metallic claws that raked across his chest, leaving deep gouges in flesh and bone. Marcus grabbed the tentacles and pulled, using his own body weight to swing around and plant his feet against the entity's torso. The impact sent shockwaves through Legion of the Wronged's form, but it was like kicking a mountain. The entity's mass was too great, its constituent parts too well integrated. For the first time in the series of combats, Marcus was genuinely outmatched. But being outmatched had never stopped a human before. He let himself fall as the entity's grip loosened, rolling across the arena floor and coming up with a piece of debris from an earlier fight. A shard of crystalline matter from the Zephyrian champion. The fragment was still resonating with harmonic frequencies, and Marcus struck it against his blade to amplify the effect. The sound that emerged was like the scream of a dying star. It cut through the chamber with physical force, shattering viewing windows and sending delegates diving for cover, but more importantly, it disrupted the harmonic frequencies that held Legion of the Wrong's composite form together. The entity staggered, its 17 aspects beginning to separate. Marcus pressed his advantage, striking the crystal fragment again and again, each node driving the constituent species further apart. The aquan aspect began to lose cohesion, its liquid form splashing across the arena floor. The Zarkith crystalline structure developed fractures that spread like spider webs. "You cannot destroy us," Legion gasped, its voice now discordant as the species components began to speak separately. "We are righteousness given form. We are justice for the fallen. Your nostalgia for a galaxy that never existed," Marcus replied, driving his blade into the entity's chest. "You're the collective whining of species that refused to evolve when the universe demanded change." The blade found its mark, but instead of ending the fight, it triggered something far worse. Legion of the Wrong's form exploded outward, each of the 17 aspects becoming a separate opponent. The arena floor cracked and buckled as 17 different champions materialized, each one burning with the fury of their extinct species. Marcus found himself surrounded by the ghosts of galactic history. The Zarkith wielded weapons of living crystal that sang as they cut through the air. The aquan flowed around him like a living tide, trying to drown him in sentient water. The Ferris Brotherhood champion clanked forward on mechanized legs, its metal form bristling with weapons. This was beyond anything he'd faced before. This wasn't just one-on-one combat. This was one human against the combined military might of 17 species. The arena became a maelstrom of violence as alien champions attacked from every angle. Marcus's tungsten blade flashed through the air, parrying crystal spears and metal claws. He rolled beneath the aquan's flowing form, came up to drive his blade into the Ferris champion's power core, then spun to block a strike from the tentacled horror that had been the Murdic species. Blood flowed freely, now his own and that of his opponents. The Zarkith champion fell with its crystal heart shattered, but 2 more species took its place. The aquan dispersed into component droplets, but reformed as Marcus turned to face the next threat. He was losing. For the first time in 12 fights, Marcus Voss was losing. His body was failing. His blade was chipped beyond repair, and he was facing odds that no single being should survive. But then he remembered something his old drill sergeant had told him during the war for Mars. When you're outnumbered, don't fight fair. When you're outgunned, don't fight clean. When you're dying, don't fight to win, fight to make them pay. Marcus smiled through the blood and pain. He'd been fighting to prove humanity's worth, fighting to save his species, fighting to win. But he'd forgotten the most important lesson of human warfare. Sometimes the best victory is making sure your enemy regrets ever starting the fight. He stopped trying to win and started trying to hurt them. The Ferris Brotherhood champion's metal form was strong, but Marcus had fought on worlds where the atmosphere was so corrosive it could eat through starship hulls. He grabbed the alien's power core and held on his electrical energy course through his body, ignoring the agony as he tore the mechanism apart with his bare hands. The aquan's liquid form was nearly invulnerable, but Marcus had learned to fight underwater during the siege of Europa. He let the alien flow over him, then channeled his body's electrical field enhanced by the power core's energy into the conductive liquid. The aquan screamed as it boiled from within. One by one, he pulled the alien champions down with him, not through superior skill or advanced technique, but through the simple, brutal human refusal to die quietly. Each champion he killed took another piece of him, another fragment of his failing body and mind. When the last of the 17 fell, Marcus collapsed to his knees in the center of the arena. The floor was a lake of blood and alien ichor, littered with the remains of 28 champions. His tungsten blade lay broken beside him, its metal finally succumbing to the stresses of impossible combat. The chamber had fallen silent, not the respectful silence of observers watching a formal duel, but the horrified quiet of beings who had witnessed something that challenged their fundamental understanding of reality. A single human had just defeated the combined military might of 17 species simultaneously. Marcus struggled to his feet, his body held together by nothing more than stubborn refusal to fall. When he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the chamber. 28 champions, he said, each word costing him visible effort. 28 species represented, 28 different definitions of perfection, and every single one of them is dead on this floor. High Arbiter Velinara rose from the judgment throne, her forearms trembling. This is impossible. No single being should be able to what? Marcus interrupted, his eyes blazing with exhaustion and fury. Should be able to survive when you try to exterminate his species? Should be able to fight back when you condemn his people to slow death? Should be able to stand here, covered in the blood of your champions, and ask you what you're going to do next? The chamber erupted in panicked chatter as delegates realized the implications. The right of escalation was still in effect. Any species could still send a champion. But who would be willing to face the human who had just turned the arena into a graveyard? The vote, Marcus continued, his voice cutting through the chaos. You were going to vote on humanity's exile, on our death sentence. I think it's time to reconsider your position, but the galaxy wasn't ready to yield. From the highest tier of the chamber, a new voice spoke, ancient, vast, and carrying the weight of eons. I will face the human. The voice belonged to something that predated most of galactic civilization, a primarch of the first ones, beings who had ruled the galaxy before the current species had even evolved. The creature that materialized in the arena was less a physical being than a force of nature, given consciousness, its form shifting between states of matter like a living embodiment of the universe's fundamental forces. I am entropy eternal, it announced, its voice resonating through dimensions that most species couldn't perceive. I have witnessed the birth and death of 1,000 civilizations. I have seen species rise to greatness only to fall into dust. I am the last of the first ones, and I will not allow this mockery to continue. Marcus looked up at the entity and felt something he hadn't experienced in any of the previous fights: genuine terror. This wasn't just another champion. This was a being that had existed when the galaxy was young, that had helped establish the very laws of physics that governed reality. But terror was just another emotion to be conquered. First ones, Marcus said, spitting blood onto the arena floor. The species that ruled the galaxy before anyone else had a chance. The ones who decided they knew best how everyone else should live. Tell me, entropy eternal, how many civilizations did your people destroy in the name of maintaining order? The Primarch's form rippled with what might have been amusement. Destruction is too crude a term. We guided, we shaped, we prevented the chaos that would have consumed everything under our rule. The galaxy knew peace for 10 million years. Peace, Marcus repeated, struggling to his feet despite his body's protests. The peace of the grave, the peace of stagnation, the peace of species too terrified to think for themselves. And what has your species brought but war and chaos? Entropy Eternal's form solidified into something vaguely humanoid, towering for meters above Marcus. In 47 years, humanity has destabilized 3 sectors, destroyed established trade routes, and brought nothing but violence to every world it touches. Marcus laughed, the sound echoing strangely in the chamber. We brought change. We brought growth. We brought the one thing your perfect little galaxy couldn't handle, the possibility that things could be different. The Primarch attacked without warning. Its assault coming not as a physical strike, but as a direct manipulation of reality itself. The arena floor beneath Marcus's feet began to dissolve, as Entropy Eternal rewrote the fundamental laws governing matter in local space. But Marcus had fought gods before, not literally, but close enough. On Kepler 44b, he'd faced the collective consciousness of an entire planet, a being so vast and powerful that it had reshaped local space-time to serve its will. He'd learned that even gods had to follow rules, and rules could be exploited. As the floor dissolved beneath him, Marcus didn't try to escape. Instead, he dove deeper into the dissolution, letting his body partially phase out of normal reality. The Primarch's reality manipulation required a stable reference point, and by becoming unstable himself, Marcus made it impossible for the entity to maintain its grip on local physics. Impossible. Entropy Eternal gasped as its carefully controlled reality manipulation began to spiral out of control. You cannot exist in a state of quantum uncertainty. Conscious beings require fixed reference points. Humans don't require anything, Marcus replied, his voice coming from everywhere and nowhere as his consciousness spread through the disrupted space. We adapt, we evolve, we become whatever we need to become to survive. The battle that followed transcended physical combat. It was a war fought on the level of fundamental reality, with Marcus's stubborn refusal to accept limitations, pitted against the Primarch's eons of experience. In manipulating the universe's basic laws, entropy eternal reshaped gravity to crush Marcus into a singularity. Marcus responded by accepting gravitational collapse and using the resulting energy to fuel his own reality manipulation. The Primarch reversed time to undo Marcus's victories. Marcus countered by existing in multiple temporal states simultaneously, making temporal manipulation impossible. "You are chaos incarnate," the Primarch declared, its form beginning to destabilize as the fundamental contradictions of Marcus's existence spread through local space-time. "You are everything we sought to prevent. You are the end of order itself. I'm the beginning of everything you were too afraid to allow," Marcus replied, his consciousness reassembling into physical form as he grabbed the Primarch's energy matrix. "I'm change. I'm growth. I'm the future you tried to prevent." The contact between human determination and Primarch order created a cascade failure that rippled through both beings. Entropy eternal screamed as its perfect understanding of universal law was contaminated by human chaos. Marcus roared as eons of cosmic knowledge flooded through his mind. When the energy discharge finally faded, both beings lay motionless on the arena floor. The chamber held its breath, waiting to see which would rise. Marcus opened his eyes first. The Primarch was gone. Its energy dispersed back into the quantum foam from which it had originally emerged. Marcus lay in the center of a crater that had been melted into the arena floor, his body somehow intact despite the forces that had torn through local reality. But something had changed. As Marcus struggled to his feet, he could feel it not just in himself, but in the chamber around him. The death of Entropy Eternal had sent shockwaves through the fundamental structure of galactic civilization. Ancient protocols were activating, systems that hadn't been triggered since the first ones established their rule. The chamber's walls began to shift, revealing hidden alcoves that contained representatives of species so old that their names had been forgotten. These were the Hidden Ones, civilizations that had survived the First One's rule by retreating into the deep places of the galaxy. "The compact is broken," one of them spoke, its voice like the whisper of stellar winds. "The First One is dead. The ancient order is ended." High Arbiter Velinara stared in shock as more alcoves opened, revealing hundreds of species that the Galactic Council hadn't even known existed. What is happening? "The galaxy is being reborn," another Hidden One replied. "The human has done what we could not. He has shattered the chains that bound us to the First One's vision of order." Marcus looked around the chamber, seeing it with new eyes. The knowledge he'd absorbed from Entropy Eternal was still flooding through his mind, showing him the true history of galactic civilization. The Galactic Council wasn't the supreme authority he thought it was. It was a puppet government, established by the First Ones to maintain their control while they slept in the deep places between stars. But now the last of the First Ones was dead, and the galaxy was free to choose its own path. "The rite of escalation is concluded," Marcus announced, his voice carrying new authority that resonated through dimensions that delegates couldn't perceive. 29 champions have fallen. No more challengers remain. By the ancient laws, my victory stands. The chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. The human hadn't just won the right to prevent his species' exile. He had won the right to reshape galactic civilization itself. The transformation of the Galactic Council chamber was unlike anything in recorded history. Ancient mechanisms, dormant for millions of years, hummed to life as the death of the last Primarch triggered protocols established. When the galaxy was young, the rigid tiers of seeding flowed like liquid metal, reshaping themselves into a more democratic arrangement. The Judgment Throne cracked and dissolved, its crystalline structure unable to maintain integrity without the Primarch's will to sustain it. Marcus stood at the center of it all, no longer just a human champion, but something new, a bridge between the galaxy's ancient past and its uncertain future. The knowledge absorbed from Entropy Eternal burned in his mind like a star, showing him truths that would have driven a lesser consciousness insane. "The compact of control is dissolved," he announced, his voice carrying across dimensions that most species couldn't perceive. "The First One's rule is ended. For the first time in 10 million years, the galaxy is free to determine its own destiny." High Arbiter Velinar, former High Arbiter, he realized, as her title carried no weight and the new order stared at him with her for eyes wide with shock. You cannot simply dissolve galactic law. There must be structure. There must be order. There will be, Marcus replied, gesturing to the hidden ones who were emerging from their ancient alcoves. But it will be order chosen by consent, not imposed by force. The galaxy has been living under a dictatorship so old that most species forgot they were slaves. A new voice spoke from among the hidden ones, a crystalline being whose form seemed to contain entire star systems. We are the architects of tomorrow, it said. We have waited eons for this moment. The human has broken the chains that bound us all. The chamber filled with species that most delegates had thought were myths, the star singers, who could navigate through hyperspace by sound alone, the void walkers who existed partially outside normal reality, the time dancers who experienced past and future simultaneously, all had been driven into hiding by the first one's rigid order. You want to know what humanity brings to the galaxy? Marcus asked, looking around at the assembled delegates. We bring the courage to break things that need breaking. We bring the wisdom to know that sometimes destruction is the first step toward growth. But not everyone was ready to accept the new reality. The Corvani delegation, what remained of it after their champion's death, rose in unison. This is chaos, their speaker declared. Without the established order, the galaxy will tear itself apart. Species will war against each other. Trade will collapse. Civilization itself will fall. Marcus turned to face them, his expression hard as neutronium. Species have been warring against each other for the entire history of the Galactic Council. The only difference is that now they'll be fighting for reasons they choose, instead of conflicts engineered by beings who saw you all as playing pieces in a game you didn't even know you were part of. He gestured to the arena floor, still stained with the blood of 29 champions. Every one of those beings died believing they were fighting for their species' honor, but they were really dying to maintain a system designed to keep the galaxy frozen in place. The first ones didn't want peace, they wanted stagnation. They didn't want order, they wanted control. One of the star singers stepped forward, its crystalline form resonating with harmonies that made the chamber walls sing. The human speaks truth. We have watched from the shadows as species after species was broken on the wheel of artificial conflict. The Veltra Corvani War, the Zephyrian expansion, the Great Purge of the Outer Rim, all of these were orchestrated to prevent any single species from growing strong enough to challenge the hidden order. But now the order is broken, another hidden one added. The galaxy can finally evolve. High Arbiter Velinara looked around the chamber, seeing her authority crumbling like sand. What happens now? Who will lead? Who will make the decisions that affect billions of worlds? Marcus smiled, and for the first time since entering the chamber, it was a genuine expression of joy rather than grim determination. That's the beautiful thing about freedom. Nobody has to lead everyone. Species can govern themselves, make their own alliances, choose their own paths. And humanity, she asked, what role will your species play in this new galaxy? The same role we've always played. Marcus replied, we'll be the ones who refuse to accept that things have to stay the same. We'll be the ones who break the chains when others are too comfortable wearing them. We'll be the ones who remind everyone that the universe is vast and full of possibilities. The star singer's harmonies shifted to something that might have been laughter. The human speaks of breaking chains, but he has already forged new ones. The knowledge he absorbed from the Primarch has made him something beyond ordinary mortality. He cannot simply return to his previous existence. Marcus felt the truth of those words. The cosmic awareness flowing through his mind showed him the galaxy's true scope, not just the inhabited systems known to the Council, but the vast reaches of unexplored space where ancient mysteries waited to be uncovered. He could see the threads that connected every living world, the patterns that shaped galactic evolution, the infinite potential of a universe finally free to grow. Then I won't, he said simply. Humanity will need guides in this new galaxy. Teachers who can help them understand their place in something larger than themselves. A general. One of the delegates whispered, the word carrying through the chamber like wildfire. A general with 1,000 species behind him, another added. Marcus looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives. No longer delegates of a puppet government, but free beings choosing their own allegiances. The hidden ones stood, ready to share the knowledge they preserved through eons of enforced secrecy. The former council species were beginning to understand the true scope of their liberation, and somewhere among them all, humanity would find its place, Not a general, Marcus corrected. A teacher, a guide, someone who can help others learn what humans have always known, that the only chains that can truly bind you are the ones you choose to wear. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of voices as species began to debate, argue, and negotiate with each other directly for the first time in millions of years. But through it all, Marcus could hear something else, the sound of possibilities, opening, of futures being born, of a galaxy finally free to become whatever it chose to be. He had entered the chamber as humanity's last desperate champion. He was leaving it as something far more important, the catalyst for galactic revolution, the bridge between order and chaos, the teacher who would help 1,000 species learn to be free. The war for humanity's survival was over. The age of galactic evolution had begun. As the chamber's transformation completed itself, Marcus walked toward the exit, no longer just a human, but not yet whatever he was becoming. Behind him, the representatives of 1,000 species began a long, difficult work of building a new civilization from the ashes of the old. The galaxy would never be the same, and for the first time in 10 million years, that was exactly as it should be. In the depths of space, human colony ships received new transmissions, not messages of exile and death, but invitations to join a galactic community that was finally ready to grow. The age of humanity's isolation was ending. The age of their true expansion was about to begin.